Hi, I'm Rebecca, and I'm here to teach you all the things that your piano teacher never taught you growing up. I took piano lessons for a very long time, from the age of 5 years old all the way through college, and I was a music major. When I got to college, I realized how little theory I had and how many things like improvising on the piano I never learned how to do. Improvising is not something that came easy to me, and so I had to learn how to do the steps in order to create really cool music without actually looking at the notes on the page. So that's what I'm here to teach you to do. A lot of times I got stuck in a chord pattern of going from the 1 chord to the 6 to the 4 to the 5. And that's a valid chord pattern, but it's not the only one out there. So once I got a few really interesting chord patterns down in my left hand, it opened up the world of composing and improvising. I'm here to share with you some of my favorite chord progressions. So if you have ever gotten stuck with that chord progression that I taught you with, which is a pop music chord progression, then this is the perfect video for you. I'll share with you one of my very favorites that you don't hear too often, but it makes you sound like you really know how to do a lot of improvising. And I'll also share with you some of my favorite left hand patterns so that you don't get stuck just doing the same thing in your left hand over and over again. Come over to the piano and I'll show you my favorite chord progression. For the purpose of today's example of our new chord progression, we are going to start in C major. C major is the easiest to show because it is all white keys and it is between C and C. So I would recommend always when you're starting to improvise or compose or whatever you're playing that you start with this scale first because it kind of teaches your fingers where to go. Now make sure to check out my video on how to create good melodies and the major chords in each of the keys of the circle of fifths, but for now we're going to stay with C major. So in the key of C major, if we build chords on each of the notes of the scale, we just keep this same pattern here in your left hand of the triad. And you can see the different chords. So the 1 chord is always a major chord. And then the 2 chord is a minor chord, D minor. The 3 chord is a minor chord, E minor. The 4 chord is a major chord, F major. 5 chord is a major chord, G major. 6 chord is a minor chord, A minor. The 7 chord is a B diminished. And then we're back to our 1 major chord. So the regular pop pattern that a lot of people seem to get in kind of stuck in is going from a 1 chord to a 6 chord to a 4 chord and then to a 5 chord. So first we're going to start with a 1 chord, which is C, E, G. Then we're going to go to a 3 chord. The 3 is minor and it is built on top of the E. So we're going from 1 to 3. 3 then goes to 4. And then 5 is the next chord. But instead of just playing a 5, we're going to play a sustained or a suspended chord, depending on how you learned it. So a sustained or suspended chord is built on the 5, and it's where you take the 3, which for this note is on a B, and you move it up 1. So we have a G, C, and D. And you hear that tension there. There's a second at the top. And there's tension that we want to resolve. So then we're going to resolve it down with our 3 back to the B. So when we hit the 5 chord, we're going to do this first and then resolve it. And then from the 5 chord, you can do any number of things, but for now we're just going to go back to the 1 chord. All right, so one more time. We're going 1 chord, 3 chord, 4, suspended 5, regular 5, and then 1. For now, let's keep our hand in a 5-finger pattern. So we have our right hand on C, D, E, F, and G. And we're going to just hit the stacked chord or the triad in our left hand. So think of measures of 4 beats. So we're going to do 1 beat with the left hand, and then 3 beats with the right hand. Like that. So let's go through our chord progression with this simple little 5-finger pattern. It's not going to sound wonderful yet, but this is just to get comfortable in whatever key you're in and getting used to this chord progression. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back to 1, like that. So then once you become familiar with that, then you can take your hand, your right hand, and you can make a melody in between C and C. For improvised melodies, I like to stick within 1 octave. 1 octave is 8 notes total within that scale. If we do melodies outside of that, it tends to get lost in the ear. Not that you can't, but for right now, let's try to stick between the C and the C. So for this example, I'm going to stick in this octave, and I'm going to use my pedal, because the pedal is going to help the sounds all blend together and just to sound a little bit better than if you didn't use the pedal. So still, for right now, we're going to stick with these stacked chords in the left hand, but this time do an octave and do anything in between the octave. You just need to make sure that you also begin and end on either C. It will make it sound like your melody has a place to start and a place to come home. So let's try it this way with our new chord progression. And if you don't like it, there's no rules when it comes to improvisation. As long as you're sticking pretty much between the octave, starting and ending on the note of the key that you are playing in, and doing your chords in your left hand, there's really no rules. If you did something and you don't like it, try something different. You can just try over and over again until you find something that you really like. If you really like it and want to save it, you can then put it down, write it down on paper, and thus begins the beginning of your song. But now let's move on to a little bit of different ways to do your left hand. A lot of times people have questions with exactly what to do with your left hand. The right hand seems self-explanatory, but the left hand isn't quite as easy. And we get a little bit tired of just doing stacked chords like this. So what you can do is you can start using some inversions of the chords. Inversions are when you still play the same 3 notes that you're playing in your stacked chords, but you play them in a different order. So this is a C chord. If you take the bottom note, which is a C, and you place it on top here, that's called your first inversion. It's still a C chord, but it's played in a different order. And then if you do it one more time, now we take the E, which is on the bottom, and we put the E on the top, that is also a C chord, but it's in the second inversion. It does have a slightly different sound. Listen to the root position, which is the stacked chord, the first inversion and the second inversion, and hear how they do sound just a little bit different. So it does change a little bit of what your song will sound like. So this time when we do it, we're going to put some inversions in there so that it's not just stacked chords all the time. This does require a little bit of practice because there's lots of different ways that you can do this. But let's just try. We're going to start with the 1 major chord from the C to the E minor, which is our third. So the notes for the E minor are E, G, and B. Okay? So if we start here, we already have the E and the G, but the B is right here. So all we have to move is that pinky, or your number 5 finger. So from here to here. Now our next chord is an F major. F major is F, A, C. So if we keep this same pattern of our left hand and just move up 1 note each, we will be on the second inversion of the F chord. So we have C, F, and A. So watch that again. So we've got our one chord stacked, and then we go to our second inversion of the 3 chord, and then move the whole thing up, second inversion of a 4 chord. And then we're going to go to our 5 chord. So the notes for the 5 chord are G, B, and D. But if we made that a sustained or a suspended chord, it is G, C, D. So we have our C and our D right here, and our G right here. And then we're resolving the C down to a B. Okay? So let's look at the progression again with our inversions. So we have 1, 3, 4, 5 sustained, and then we're back to our 1 chord. So that might take a little bit of practice, but once you've got it down, then you can try to put it together in your right hand with a little tiny melody. So let's try this. So we have our regular stacked pattern of playing. We have our inversions, which is the second way of playing. And another way, which is one of my favorites, is to do an octave that represents the chord. So for our C major chord, we have an octave of our 5 and our 1 finger on the C. And then we're going to put the 5 down of the chord, which is this, G. So instead of playing the entire chord like that, we're just dropping the 3rd. And you can arpeggiate it like this. And then we go to our 3 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, and then 1 chord. Now you'll notice that with the sustained 5 chord, we do not have the opportunity to hit the C in the left hand. So that means if you want to do a sustained or suspended in your right hand, then you have to add the C in your right hand to get that sound. So now let's try it over here with this new little pattern. If you didn't want to do an arpeggio with your 5 in the middle, if that seems just a little bit too out of reach right now, you can just do octaves also. And I know that that does take some practice as well, to just hit those notes and not hit the other notes between them. So a lot of times your thumb or your 1 finger will have a hard time only hitting 1 note at a time. That just takes some practice so that you can work on that. But if you just kind of play octaves up and down the scale, you'll eventually get the feeling. So you're only hitting the 2 notes and no other notes. The last little pattern that we're going to talk about in the left hand is called an Alberti bass. So we take the bottom, the top note, and then the middle note. And just a note, when we get to the sustained chord 5, we want to hit bottom, top, C first, and then bottom, top, B. So here's how this one would look. Make sure to check out my other videos on different chord progressions that you can try out, as well as my improvisation videos as we work through the circle of fifths in my studio. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever tried this chord progression or if it is something that is completely new to you. I hope you stick with it. Try it in different keys. See if you can make it out of C major, because some different keys will make it more interesting. Good luck. Keep practicing. Don't give up.